How's it going, everybody? Jackson Fuller here with Owen Hassell. It's our weekly tradition during the fall, maybe even further, we'll see, but it's time to talk some high school football, Owen. Really kind of a slim pickings in games this week, huh? We just have 5 local games, but we've got a couple of really good ones.
I think the biggest thing to take away from it is, yes, a short week of games, or not short week, but a small number of games. But New Hanover and Hoggard are both home, and maybe for the latter, Hoggard finally home.
Yeah, the Vikings it's just been a crazy start. It's been a difficult start. That was the word I was going to use. But 0-2 right now. Let's start there. The Hoggard returns home after a road loss at Scotland County about 3 weeks ago now. They went down to Carolina Forest in Myrtle Beach and lost last week by about 20 points. So the Vikings are finally home hosting a Purnell Sweat team that also doesn't have a win this year. Purnell Sweat's 0-3, and I know around the state people expected Purnell Sweat to be a better football team this year, but they haven't. I don't think they've scored more than 20 points this season so far. So an opportunity for Hoggard at home to try and build some momentum, and I think they really need some right now with kind of the amount of injuries they've had and the 2 tough losses. But that's 2 of the toughest games that anybody, maybe Wallace Roseville has a more difficult schedule, but other than that, nobody has played 2 tougher opponents than Hoggard to start the season.
It is a tough grind, and you hear a lot of and I think Coach Underwood has even tweeted this out, the trust the process talk and the grind and the work hard each day, all those types of those lingos of statements that you're trying just to keep the troops refreshed and realizing that this is the whole marathon, not a sprint. I can go through every cliche we want to in the book about it, but this is a game where you don't want to just win, even though right now victory is just the most important thing in the world. You want to win, and you want to dominate this one as much as anything because, well, you haven't won yet, but 2, it's a home game, first home game of the season, and just for the guys' morale to say, hey, we're Hoggard. We've been pretty good the last couple years. We're not what our record says we are.
Right.
We're not 0-2, and we're going to show you one example of who we really are.
You gotta play well. I mean, are they going to win this game by 30, 40 points? I don't know. I don't know if the Hoggard's offense this season's good enough to kind of put up a 40-point game against a team that has, Purnell Sweat, for what I've said about their lack of scoring, they've been pretty good defensively against the teams that they've played so far. The offensive line has to play better. Coming into the season, we thought that was going to be a strength. They struggled against Scotland County. They struggled against Carolina Forest to really create any running room. That's something you want to see. But look, Craig Underwood schedules Scotland County and Carolina Forest. When you make those games, you could lose those games. Of course, the South Robeson game, I think you being 1-2 and 0-2 is not that different, but it feels different, when for a team morale. So they know that for Hoggard, tough start, but there's bigger goals ahead. Winning the Mid-Eastern and being the best team that they can be going into a state playoff.
Yeah, and realize you're going to get a pretty good seed if you win the Mid-Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't win a non-conference game, you're going to get a solid seed, probably to the point where you would have 2 home games in the playoffs. Granted, you have to win
or
the
a first round bye. I mean,
that's still on the table, but I think that would be a much harder thing to be on the table if you've lost, let's say, 3 non-conference games.
Right.
That would be pretty difficult. The point is, there's still a lot of things that you can control, and it's pretty simple. Just control what you can control, and the Hoggard still has a lot in front of it.
Absolutely. That'll be the game I'm covering this weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing Hoggard for the first time this year. I mean, can't believe it's been 4 weeks of football and we haven't been able to cover a Hoggard game, but they've been on the road and kind of far away, and then they had their opening game canceled for the South Robeson school cancellation. So you mentioned the Mid-Eastern Conference, one of the teams that's looking really impressive out of the MEC that always looks good, but I think we've been pleasantly surprised with how well they played as New Hanover. 3-0 under head coach Dylan Dimmick. They grinded out a 28-21 win over Northside Jacksonville last week. They're also at home, and they're playing a 3-0 Jack Britt team who hasn't necessarily played the elite competition a little westward in the state. But, you get to that Fayetteville, Raleigh area, any win is kind of a good win in the non-conference. And Jack Britt, 3-0, it should be a good test for the Wildcats before everyone enters MEC play next week.
We all wondered what that tough competition was going to do to New Hanover last week against Northside Jacksonville. Sounds like the Wildcats certainly answered the call there. That's going to do nothing but help their confidence. Yes, you're playing Jack Britt, but you're playing them at home. Can New Hanover go undefeated in the non-conference? And now you're looking at seeding for yourself at this point for the playoffs, because we just said with Hoggard, still a lot of things are in front of it. There's even more in front of New Hanover right now. Let's say New Hanover runs the table. Did we ever think that was an idea going into the season? No. Is it still? It could be. It's a little bit. It's there, and maybe I should quote Gene Hackman from Hoosiers. Hey, that state championship's there. Let's just leave it right there from where it is. But we're in week 5 now.
Yeah, and look, and I mean, Hanover, that's a winning football program. They might not have the same amount of talent and depth that they had 2 years ago, but they still have high expectations for themselves regardless of what's around, just because of the history that's been there. I know when I talked to Mackay Stanley after the Eastern Wayne game, he mentioned a state championship. Like, look, that's still the goal for New Hanover football every year. You're right. If they win this game, I think the Mid-Eastern Conference as a whole, the top of it, New Hanover and Hoggard aren't maybe as good as they have been in years past, but West Brunswick, Topsail, North Brunswick, and South Brunswick are all better than they have been in years past. Still, there is an opportunity to run the table. Of course, Dimmick and the Wildcats will be one game at a time, one game at a time mantra. I will say the New Hanover offense, they probably have, I don't think there's a team in the area with two, or at least in the Mid-Eastern Conference, with two better offensive players than Mackay Stanley and Jaheim Marshall. And that's a great place to start when you're trying to win a conference championship. They've got two guys that no one else has this year.
And do you remember when Dylan Dimmick was hired? A lot of people had questions. I had questions. I think we all did. And, of course, some people wanted to go with, don't pick somebody from Hoggard staff to be the New Hanover coach. But how interesting it is when you keep winning.
Yep.
None of that matters anymore. Winning cures everything. And right now, New Hanover's doing what it needs to do. I'm sure there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. But right now, it keeps checking off the boxes.
Absolutely. Northside Jacksonville, they're involved with one of our other local teams at Wallace Rose Hill this week. I made a terrible prediction and said the Bulldogs would go undefeated in non-conference last week. They lost to Havelock 21-7, and that's, Havelock's a really great program, but that still was a surprise. I mean, we were just talking about it. I don't think people expected Wallace Rose Hill to lose and only score 7 points against the Rams.
That, and at least your prediction is still on the table for Wallace Rose Hill beating Wake Forest. Want to make sure we still have that.
I'm taking that off the table.
No, there's a table where no. You can still do that. That's not against the rules.
Why not?
But yeah, 7 points for Wallace, the way the Bulldogs can run the football, and maybe sometimes that time management that you have with running like that can come back to haunt you. That obviously I didn't see the game, but it was definitely, I don't know if there's a humble aspect of this, because Havelock definitely humbled the Bulldogs last year.
And look, they played on a Tuesday too before playing Havelock. They beat Trask 71-0, but still you had to go through football can be a grind. I don't care what the score is. There's a lot of physical contact every game. Who knows if that played a part? They're going to want to bounce back this week against Northside Jacksonville, who's a solid 3A team. I mean, they only lost by 7 to New Hanover. This is another good test for Wallace Rose Hill, and their difficult non-conference schedule continues. The only other two teams in action this Friday hail from Brunswick County. You got North Brunswick 2-1, traveling to face Swansboro 4-0. The Scorpions are 1 win away from matching their season total from last year. Exceeding their season total from last year. It'll be a tough test against Swansboro, who undefeated so far. They seem to be, talking to Chris Miller a little bit from Jacksonville, a well-coached team, and they're, 4-0 is 4-0. That's impressive no matter where you put it. But I think Brian Davis is happy right now with all the injuries that he's had to battle. Jaheim Marshall, Kwesi Clark, who were going to be two of the guys that he was going to really rely on, haven't played since the first couple snaps of the game against Whiteville. Still, North Brunswick 2-1, and the offense looks pretty good. You got anything on the Scorpions? I think the Brian Davis, we expected this a little bit this year, a turnaround for North Brunswick.
It's excitement. Obviously, the turf field as well, that never hurts. But to be able to win a game like it did against Trask, and I realize Trask is struggling a bit right now, first-year coach, all of that. But when you have a young team like North Brunswick And to be able to do that, it doesn't matter who the team is.
Yeah.
And especially when this is Brian Davis' second year, so he's not new to this scene. He's new to that scene, but he's not new to the area either.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of excitement with that, and you can't ask for much more going into a Swansboro game. That if North Brunswick wins that, are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised, but I do think Swansboro, if we had to set a line for that game, would be the favorite. I would go Swansboro minus 6.5. Maybe.
Interesting thing about confidence, though, and I realize 4-0, you can't be much more confident than that either. But interesting thing about confidence and young players who maybe don't know any better, if that's the right term for it, they don't necessarily understand the stakes, and that could be a good thing.
Absolutely. And then South Brunswick, down in Southport, they're at Lakewood. South Brunswick 2-1. They beat Ashley 10-6 last Friday. That was the game I was at. It was a really kind of a defensive slugfest.
South Brunswick Ashley game.
It was a classic South Brunswick and Ashley football game, low scoring. Cougars pulled it out. I was impressed with Roman Dilgard and Miguel Miller on the South Brunswick offense. They're traveling to Lakewood, who's 2-2. This is a game the Cougars probably expect to win and get to 3-1, which was exactly where they were last year going into the conference. We are certainly knocking on any kind of wood that we can find that we don't have another hurricane to disrupt us, because that really hurt the Cougars last season. Having that long break, losing some guys, and then jumping into conference play, they weren't the same team after that. So if South Brunswick can get to 3-1, hey, they've already beaten one team in the MEC, even though it didn't count for a conference win. I think the Cougars also are another team that, is building confidence. I think most of the MEC, other than Ashley, Laney, and Hoggard right now, the other 5 teams have to be pretty confident with where they are and happy with where they are at the moment.
And how close is South Brunswick to being undefeated right now?
Well, they lost to Midway, and they didn't score a point in the second half, but it was still a one-possession game.
That's
so
what I mean.
They could easily be 3-0. And I'm glad you brought that up, because Lakewood also played Midway this year, and Lakewood lost by 20 points. I mean, you can't ever roll over scores like that. But for high school football, it's a good way to kind of compare.
But at this point, you could have had 3 Mid-Eastern Conference teams undefeated.
Yeah.
And in the 5th week of the season,
because West Brunswick is 3-0 right now. So
yes, so you have West Brunswick top. Well, you'd have 4 teams. Sorry.
Yeah.
See, that's why I kind of said it like that. I want you to step in and say, when you're wrong, do that, and
4
now
teams.
Because you're the guy. But yeah, West Brunswick, Topsail,
New
Hanover,
maybe South Brunswick.
And would have maybe been South Brunswick, half the conference, and even so, just one loss. I mean, that's showing a lot for the league. I'm not even thinking necessarily about the competition it faced, and in some cases face themselves in non-conference play, but that is a big boost for the league. I think this league has a little bit more parity this year, and that is something we expected, but it was hard to tell for sure until you got a few weeks into it. I think this league has got a little bit more balance, and there's probably some teams, I don't want to say licking chops at Hoggard, because, Hoggard's still going to be good when it all boils down, but 0-2 is still 0-2.
There's a crack in the door, I think.
Okay, there we go.
West Brunswick, and going into the past couple years, we would go cover a game, and you just kind of were waiting for Hoggard New Hanover to decide the MEC. And even last year, New Hanover wasn't as good as it had been, and they played Laney close, they played North Brunswick really close. It felt like it's going to come down to Hoggard New Hanover. It still very might come down to that game at the end of the year, and we wouldn't be surprised at all if it does. But, it feels like West Brunswick and Topsail are both going to give those 2 teams better games this season. And, North Brunswick and South Brunswick are improving. And, the coaches there, Coach Brian Davis and Coach Rocky Lewis, both feel good about where their programs are going, and that's not only a good sign for this year, but for the for the future of that conference. Because when there is more parity in a conference, it just makes everybody better.
I think if there's some type of crack there for Hoggard, there's probably the flex skill commercial guy ready to come in
and fill it up.
Fill it up. I think that's going to be that guy will be there after Friday's game with Purnell Sweat.
Coach Underwood's ready to kind of seal that crack up and make sure the Vikings don't release their grasp over the two-time defending MEC champions. I know they really want it to be a third straight year here. So that's it. That's the 5 games. Those are the 5 local games. Again, I'm covering Purnell Sweat at Hoggard. Looking forward to seeing the Vikings for the first time this year. You can follow me on Twitter at Star News Varsity. And Noah Powers, our wonderful freelancer from UNCW, will be covering the Jack Britt at New Hanover game. So you can follow him for updates on that one at TealNoah23. One more Friday night with a non-conference play here in the area. Next week, the MAC play opens up. And kind of a light slate of games, from what I can remember, in terms of really the favorites aren't playing each other next week. But the following week, we get New Hanover Topsail, and I think every week after, starting in the first week of October, we're going to have meaningful games in the MEC, and that's something that this conference hasn't really had in years past, where you have games every week that who could win that one and make a difference in the top of the standings. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. Jackson, Fuller, Owen Hassell. Follow us along on Twitter and Facebook, and anywhere else you can find Star News Online high school sports coverage. We'll have it all covered for you this Friday night.